Solomon Asch's conformity experiments and the application in modern propaganda. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments in the 1950s were a groundbreaking peek into how humans bend under social pressure. Picture this. A group of people sits in a room tasked with a simple job, judging the length of lines on a card. Seems easy, right? But here's the twist. All but one person in the group are actors, deliberately giving wrong answers. The real subject, unaware of the setup, often ends up agreeing with the majority, even when they know the answer's nonsense. Asch found that about 37% of the time people conformed to the group's incorrect judgment. Why? Because going against the crowd feels uncomfortable, risky, even isolating. This wasn't about intelligence or cowardice, it was about the raw power of social influence. Asch's work wasn't just a lab curiosity. It cracked open a window into how groups shape behavior, and it's a goldmine for understanding propaganda. Propaganda thrives on the same principle. If enough voices shout the same thing, most people will nod along, even if their gut says otherwise. Mainstream media, for instance, has a knack for amplifying this. With its reach and repetition, it can make ideas feel like unshakable truth. Take the push for COVID-19 vaccination. From 2020 onward, news outlets, governments, and even celebrities hammered a unified message: get the shot, save lives, be a good citizen. The narrative wasn't just about health, it was laced with moral weight. Dissenters weren't just wrong, they were selfish, dangerous, fringe. That's conformity in action. The majority view, blasted 24/7, didn't need to convince everyone through logic, it just needed to make disagreement feel socially unbearable. Now, this isn't to say the vaccine push was all smoke and mirrors. The point is the method. Asch showed that when a group, especially one with authority, leans hard into one stance, plenty of people will follow, even if they're skeptical. Media didn't have to prove every detail, it just had to drown out the noise. Look at how fast anti-vaxxer became a scarlet letter. The label stuck because questioning the narrative meant standing alone, and Asch proved most folks hate that. Data backs this up too. Studies like those from the American Psychological Association show conformity spikes when the stakes, real or perceived, feel high. Like during a pandemic, propaganda doesn't need force, it just needs a loud enough megaphone. Election polls are another playground for this dynamic. Remember 2016? Outlets like the Huffington Post pegged Hillary Clinton's win probability at 98 or 99%, depending on the day. Pollsters and pundits churned out numbers that felt like gospel, and the media ran with it. Why wouldn't they? A landslide prediction makes for juicy headlines and keeps the audience hooked. But here's where Asch creeps in. When everyone's saying the same thing, Clinton's got this, people start believing it even if the ground's shifting. Voters might have stayed home thinking it was a done deal, or Trump supporters might have kept quiet, assuming they were outliers. The reality? Trump won, and the 99% crowd was left scrambling. Polls aren't neutral tools, they're shaped by who's asking, who's answering, and what story sells. When media hypes them up, it's less about prediction and more about persuasion. Asch's experiments hint at why this works. If the group, or the media posing as the group, says X, plenty of us will buy it, even if the evidence is shaky. Clinton's inevitable victory wasn't a fact, it was a vibe, and conformity kept it alive until the votes said otherwise. So how do these threads tie together? Propaganda, whether it's media, vaccine campaigns, or skewed polls, leans on the same psychology Asch uncovered. It's not about brainwashing through force, it's about crafting a majority so loud, so unified, that going along feels like the only sane choice. During COVID, the messaging wasn't subtle. Ads with smiling families, news loops of case counts, and influencers preaching solidarity. It worked because it mimicked Asch's setup, a clear right answer, endorsed by the crowd, with dissenters cast as oddballs. Same with election polls. When every channel screams the same winner, it's hard not to assume they've got it figured out. But Asch's work has a flip side. Conformity isn't absolute. About 2/3 of his subjects stuck to their guns at least some of the time. That's the crack in propaganda's armor. People can resist, especially when they spot the game. Today, with X and other platforms, counter-narratives spread fast. Vaccine skeptics found their tribes, and Trump voters saw they weren't alone. The mainstream's grip isn't as tight when the group splinters. Still, the old tricks keep working because humans haven't changed. We're wired to glance at the crowd before picking a side. In the end, Asch didn't just show us how we conform, he showed us how easily perception can be weaponized. Media, governments and pollsters don't need to control our thoughts, they just need to control the room. Whether it's a vaccine needle or a ballot box, the loudest voice often wins, not because it's right, but because it's loud. And as long as we're human, that's a lever propagandists will keep pulling.